She wore a dollar store dress, they said. She actually owned the company. Welcome to satisfying drama stories, where family conflict, betrayal, and karma unfold in gripping emotional stories with endings that deliver justice. If you love dramatic twists, relatable characters, and satisfying revenge arcs, you're in the right place. New stories every week. If you enjoy stories like this one, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this content reach more people, and there are new stories just like this one waiting for you every week. Now, let's get into today's story. Alice Brown arrived home a little after 10 o'clock at night, tired from a long corporate dinner, and ready to change out of her heels and finally sit down. She unlocked her front door, stepped inside, and froze. The living room lights were on. Her son Stephen and his wife Tiffany were sitting on her couch, and neither of them had called ahead. Alice was not expecting company, especially not at this hour. Before she could even ask why they were there, Tiffany burst out laughing. "Oh my goodness, look at you," Tiffany said, pointing at Alice's outfit and covering her mouth as she giggled. "Where did you even find that dress? The clearance rack at the dollar store?" Alice glanced down at herself. In the rush of the evening, she had completely forgotten she was still dressed for the corporate dinner she had just come from. She was wearing an elegant black dress, a strand of pearl earrings, and a diamond necklace that caught the light from the lamp beside the couch. Tiffany kept going, clearly enjoying herself. She pointed at the necklace and said it looked like something from a gas station jewelry rack, all shine and no substance. She said the pearls looked like plastic beads glued onto wire, the kind of thing you'd find in a children's dress-up box. Stephen, instead of defending his mother, laughed right along with his wife, nodding in agreement as if the whole thing were the funniest joke he had heard all week. Alice stood in her own doorway, keys still in her hand, and simply looked at the two of them. She did not raise her voice. She did not correct them. She only said quietly, "I'm glad it's so funny to you." The truth was, Stephen and Tiffany had no idea who Alice Brown actually was. To them, she was just Mom, a woman who had been living modestly for years off a small insurance policy left behind after her husband passed away. That was the story Alice had allowed them to believe, and she had never corrected it. In reality, Alice Brown was the owner of the Brown Corporation, the largest furniture manufacturing company in the entire southern region. She had built the business from the ground up over the course of 2 decades, starting with a single small workshop and turning it into a company with dozens of showrooms and hundreds of employees. She was worth more money than either Stephen or Tiffany could have imagined, and she had kept it that way on purpose. Alice had made a deliberate choice years ago never to tell her son the truth about her wealth. She wanted Stephen to build his own life, to earn his own success, and to understand the value of hard work without leaning on his mother's name or her money to get ahead. She believed that handing him everything would only rob him of the chance to become a capable, independent man. It was a decision rooted in love, even if it meant Stephen grew up believing his mother had very little to offer. Unfortunately, that belief never stopped Stephen and Tiffany from showing up whenever they were short on cash. Tonight was no exception. Once the laughter finally died down, Alice set her purse on the side table and asked them plainly why they had come. Stephen shifted in his seat and said they just needed $300 for groceries. "Nothing more," he explained. "Just enough to get them through until his next paycheck." Alice raised an eyebrow and asked why they didn't have grocery money of their own. That was when Tiffany chimed in, explaining that they had just bought a brand new car and had to put down a large payment on it. Between the down payment and the new monthly bill, their budget was tight, and groceries had simply fallen through the cracks. Alice looked at her son for a long moment. She thought about the dress she was wearing, the one Tiffany had just mocked, as cheap, and she thought about how quickly people could laugh at what they didn't understand while asking for help with the other hand. "You'll have to figure this one out on your own," Alice told him. "I don't have money to give you." The room went cold, almost instantly. Stephen's jaw tightened, and Tiffany's expression shifted from amusement to open irritation. They gathered their things and headed for the door, and as they left, Tiffany turned back one last time to fire off a few more insults about Alice's appearance, her home, and what Tiffany assumed was Alice's very limited bank account. The door slammed behind them. Alice stood alone in her living room, exhausted, but unshaken. She had built a company from nothing. A few cruel words about a dress were not going to break her. The very next morning, Alice called a locksmith and had every lock in her house changed. She was not interested in another late-night surprise visit, and if Stephen and Tiffany wanted to see her going forward, they would need to call first like anyone else. Later that same afternoon, Alice's phone rang. It was her company's general manager, a longtime employee she trusted deeply. He explained that they had a promising candidate for a department manager position and asked if Alice could join him for a lunch interview to give her final approval before they extended an offer. This was standard practice. Alice liked to personally sign off on anyone stepping into a management role within the company. Alice agreed and told him she would be there. She arrived at the restaurant a little early, chose a quiet table near the window, and ordered a glass of wine while she waited. She glanced over the candidate's resume one more time, a formality she always went through before meeting anyone in person. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps approaching the table and looked up to greet the candidate. It was Stephen. He stopped dead in his tracks, his face draining of color. "Mom," he said slowly, "what are you doing here?" Before Alice could answer, the general manager stepped forward, clearly confused by the exchange, and gestured toward Alice. "Stephen, this is Alice Brown," he said. "She's the owner of the company." Stephen's mouth fell open. He looked back and forth between his mother and his boss, trying to process what he had just heard. For years, he had believed his mother scraped by on a small insurance check. Now he was learning, in the middle of a job interview, that she owned the very company he was hoping to work for. Alice remained composed. She gestured toward the empty chair across from her and told Stephen to sit down, that they would continue with the interview as planned and talk about everything else later. Stephen, still visibly shaken, lowered himself into the seat and did his best to get through the rest of the conversation, though his mind was clearly somewhere else entirely. When the interview finally ended, Stephen left the restaurant in a daze, walking slowly to his car as if he were trying to piece together a puzzle that had just been dumped out in front of him all at once. That evening, when Alice arrived home, she was not surprised to find Stephen and Tiffany waiting for her again, this time parked outside since they no longer had a working key to get inside. She invited them in and sat them down in the same living room where, less than 24 hours earlier, they had laughed at her dress. Alice explained everything. She told them about the Brown Corporation, about the years she had spent building it, and about her decision to keep it hidden from Stephen so that he could grow into his own man, rather than one who leaned on his mother's success. Stephen and Tiffany did not react with gratitude or understanding. Instead, they were furious. Tiffany argued that Alice could have helped them all along, that their lives should have looked completely different, that Alice clearly had more than enough money to spare. Stephen agreed, saying it wasn't fair that he had struggled for years while his own mother sat on a fortune. Alice looked at her son and his wife, two people who, only a day earlier, had mocked her to her face without knowing a single thing about who she really was. "It's my money," Alice said calmly, "not yours." Then she turned her attention directly to Tiffany. "And while we're at it, my dress was designer. My diamonds and my pearls were real, not fake, not from a dollar store, not from any gas station. Rack. You might want to learn a little more about what you're looking at before you decide to comment on it." She paused, letting the words settle, then added one more thing. "And after the way you spoke to me last night, you can rest assured those pearls and that necklace will never be yours. Not now, not ever." Finally, Alice looked at her son. She told him plainly that if he was offered the department manager position, it would be based entirely on his own qualifications and nothing else. She would not be stepping in on his behalf, and she would not be pulling any strings. The decision would rest completely with her management team, and she intended to stay out of it entirely. She told them both, in no uncertain terms, that it was time for them to start working out their own lives without depending on her to fix things. It was a lesson long overdue, and Alice hoped that this time it would finally stick. As she watched them leave that night, Alice thought about how close they had come to seeing the full picture only because of a chance encounter at a lunch table. She thought about the dress, the pearls, and the laughter that had filled her living room the night before. Everything is not always as it seems, she reminded herself. And sometimes, the people who laugh the loudest are the ones who understand the least. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like it. New videos are posted regularly, so make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.